Hey, Michael Besson here, Christian.com, ready for this LifeCast. Oh my goodness, my dear friend, Mike Yorkey, author of over 109 books, worked hand in hand with Dr. James Dobson at Focus on the Family. He just sort of tells us his story, man. If you ever want to hear a story, laid back, relaxed, humble, great man that tells a story about perseverance. Overcoming obstacles. A lot of times when doors appeared to be closed, they were only closed temporarily to be opened much wider to much greater opportunities. The life of Mike Yorkey is just an amazing story from the beginning to the end. For those of you that have ever read the multi-million-dollar selling Every Man's Battle, he's behind that one. The Dave Trevecki story. The Shot Caller, which is coming out with Casey Diaz. I mean, the list of books goes on and on. Jordan Rubin's amazing books on natural holistic healing. Mike Yorkey is the man behind all of that. And so on this LifeCast session, you're going to want to share this with anybody that's interested in becoming an author, anybody that's interested in the story and the journey of what that takes to do that. This is the place. This is the time. Tell your friends. Share it on Facebook. We just love you at Christian.com. And our job is to bring you people with extraordinary lives. And that's exactly what we've done with Mike Yorkey. And we are live, everybody. This is Michael Besson from Christian.com. We're ready for another LifeCast. And in full disclosure, we were already into one and it completely blew up on us. But we are with the one and the only amazing man behind so many books that's going to blow your mind. And his journey with God will do the same. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Mike Yorkey. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great, Michael. Great to see you again, and great to be on your show.
Yeah, and hopefully,
Your podcast.
we apologize, man. It's never happened before, and we have got a state-of-the-art studio. Half the people actually come in here, and we do these remote ones as well. And we've never had a hiccup either way. But anyway, God bless you. We're very honored to have you. And where we left off where let's just start from the beginning because I want the audience to just experience the extraordinary life that you've had. I know that you're a very, very humble man, and I value that, but I also want everybody to hear the story because it's amazing. So let's start in the beginning. You're a Southern California kid growing up in La Jolla. Take off from there, please.
Yeah, sure. No, I was born in La Jolla in the mid-50s. I like to tease people telling the story that, back then, La Jolla was the town of the newlywed and nearly dead. And it was just a sleepy little coastal town north of San Diego. My parents were young. My dad was pumping gas at the Texaco gas station across from the iconic La Valencia Hotel, the Pink Lady, as they called her.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah. And obviously the Texaco gas station is not there anymore, but my dad made $1 an hour. And in the early days, he had to work 6 10-hour days. And $240 a month, right? Somehow you could afford to feed a family and keep a roof over your heads, and that's what they managed to do. And so even though my parents didn't have money, I just had a really neat childhood growing up in a coastal town and going to the beach almost every day during the summer.
Wow. An all-American childhood, it sounds like. Mom and Dad stayed married. It's the 60s.
Right.
Oh, my, it's funny when you were saying that, I was flashing back. My day job is the Besson Agency, and I work with entrepreneurs all over the place. We actually opened up a place, an art gallery on, is it Prospect? Is that the name of the main street?
Prospect and Girard. Prospect is where the La Valencia Hotel is, a lot of restaurants.
And across the street from that place is where the Texaco gas station was?
Oh, yeah, back in the 50s.
I can tell you the art gallery, the retail location that we did, it was quite pricey per square foot. I recall it well.
Well,
in fact, when we did a grand opening,
a month, or?
Actually, it was about it was about 1,800 square feet, and it was more. It was closer to double that. It's close to about 10 grand a month. And
Oh my goodness.
yeah. If you want to be on Prospect in La Jolla, that's the name of the game, man. So let me understand this now. Late 60s hit. What's happening with you? You grew up. Wait. Let's back up. Did you grow up in a faith-based home? Where did the God factor come into your life? And tell us about that.
Sure. Yes, I did. My mom was a strong Catholic, and she made sure that we were at Mass every Sunday, and she enrolled me at Stella Maris Academy, which was right next to the Catholic Church in downtown La Jolla called Mary Star of the Sea Catholic Church. So I was educated by the Sisters of the Holy Cross back in the days when nuns were nuns.
I was born and raised Catholic, and I went to Catholic school. I can relate. In fact, I was telling the story the other day. I was in third grade, and we did communion before school started, and I heard somebody swear, and he's a bully, right? He was a bully. So I decide I'm going to tell on him, and I tell this sister or something, and she said, "Okay, I'll take care of this." And in the middle of the class, she said, his name was Patrick. Said, "Patrick, come here." And then, "Michael, come here." And I thought, "Oh my, don't say my name." This guy beats up everybody. And she took us out in the hallway. She grabbed his ear. She grabbed mine. She said, "Never swear before communion." Then she grabbed mine and "Stop being a tattletale." Smashed our heads together. And then he beat me up after school. So it was a bad deal. But I'm familiar with the Catholic upbringing, my friend.
Sure. We could compare our knuckles to see, they got wrapped by the yardstick, right?
Oh, man. And I don't care what flavor people call themselves in the God chase of life. To me, I remember many moments of intimacy with God in that environment. It changed later in my life, and I became kind of a denominational guy. But I still remember the majesty of that experience as a child. Did it have an impression on your heart as well?
Oh, sure. And, I did probably like you, the altar boy thing.
Me too.
I'm old enough, I'm afraid, that I had to memorize the Latin Mass.
Oh, man. I did not have to do that. We're almost the same age. We're a couple of years apart.
Sure.
But I
can still remember a couple phrases like Dominus vobiscum, ecum spiritu tuo. I don't.
Yeah.
Right?
Boy, there's a lot of dust on that Rolodex.
Sure.
When I was in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and there was a lot of French and Irish Catholic people, and they made us, for some reason, learn the Our Father in French. And years later, I was in Magic Mountain in California, and I was going up this huge roller coaster with a complete stranger who happened to be from Paris, and he only spoke French. And I said, "Oh, I know a little bit of French, Notre Pierre, que aussi, que votre nom ce soit." And he just looks at me and he goes, "Oh," like he thought we were praying. No, it's all, never mind. I couldn't get through to him, and I never forgot that.
Story.
Oh man, it was funny. So okay. So now what happens is you go to school somewhere after high school. What takes place then?
Well, after 8 years, I was a lifer at Stella Maris Academy, 1st through 8th grade, and then I went into the public schools in La Jolla, the Muirlands Junior High for 1 year, and then La Jolla High. And I always I wanted to be a sports writer. I loved reading the newspaper. And
you recognized it early, huh?
Yeah, I the nuns were good at teaching English, teaching writing, and I really loved reading sports writers or columnists and that type of thing in the San Diego Union. So I thought that might be something kind of fun. And the local newspaper in La Jolla, it's called the La Jolla Light, came out once a week. I was looking for a high school correspondent to write about La Jolla High football and La Jolla High basketball. And so I don't know how I heard about it, but I started, said I'd do it, and I got paid 10 cents a column inch. Now, today's listeners won't have any idea what that means, but it means like for every inch of copy that was printed on the page, I got 10 cents.
Oh my goodness.
And usually about the average story was 14 inches long. Yeah, so I made $1.40. But it was a great training ground.
In high school, you're talking about in high school?
High school, yeah.
Unbelievable.
So I guess you could call me a paid professional.
I'm sitting here thinking to myself, and by the way, audience, where we're headed is you've authored over 100 books. I think it's way in excess of that, but we'll get to that. And some of the most amazing books ever written were by this gentleman right here. And here's what's dancing through my heart right now. Forsake not the day of small beginnings. I mean, and I think a lot of people, especially the younger generation, they just want to go big, fast right now. But who knows where you'd be if you hadn't taken those little steps along the way?
It is remarkable. I did need to write high school sports in high school because that helped me when I went to the University of Oregon. And I was going to go to the School of Journalism, and I was going to go write for a newspaper and try to get into sports writing. That on my first week or two on campus in Eugene, Oregon, I went into the student newspaper office. Now, it was called the Oregon Daily Emerald, and they published 5 days a week. And that's pretty good for a student newspaper, and it was kind of thick. And they had, a news section and a sports section, and
real deal.
Real deal. I mean, advertisements and the whole thing looked like a newspaper. It was a tabloid, but it looked like a newspaper. So I said that, hey, I'd love to write sports, and
I'm a borderline expert at this point.
Right. I don't. Maybe because I was a warm body. I don't know. It didn't pay anything, as I remember. Right. And so the guy said, "Yeah, why don't you go out to Autzen Stadium and interview Dan Fouts about the Stanford football game this weekend, and do a pregame story." Okay. Well, Dan Fouts, he's an CBS NFL color man. Yeah, commentator. And had a successful pro career with the San Diego Chargers. He was a very good quarterback. But he was a senior at the University of Oregon that year, and I was this green freshman. And so, I walk out to the practice at Autzen Stadium, and I kind of wait for practice to end. And I walk up to Dan and I say, Dan, Mike Yorkey with the Oregon Daily Emerald, like he'd really be impressed. And I said, can I ask you a few questions about the Stanford game this week, Saturday? And I think he rolled his eyes and said, okay, And so I was asking him, I think that Oregon was having a crummy football team, and maybe I asked him a question or two, what Oregon could do to win the game or something like that. And he's talking. And so, I had this little notebook in my hand, and I'm writing because, no tape recorders in those days.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
And so I paused, and I was kind of looking at him and listening to him talk, and all of a sudden he stopped. And he said, when I'm talking, I want to see your pencil moving.
Yes, sir.
I said, whoa. I said, have you been misquoted? And then that started a tour into 4-letter words. And, he was trying to intimidate me.
Baptism by fire, baby.
Right. Take control of the interview. And, he did intimidate me. I'll admit it. He was 4 years older than me at the time.
Right.
And so, but, I wrote the story, and that started a nice little college career of writing football and basketball sports.
Did you do that all the way? Did you do that all the way through college?
Yeah, I did that all the way through college, and I got to be in the locker room. Back in those days, I can remember after a UCLA game, I was down in the locker room. John Wooden was the coach back then.
Oh, my goodness.
And, in those days, there were maybe 4 reporters, one from Portland, one from Eugene, maybe one from Salem, little old me.
And one from La Jolla.
Yeah. So I'm just standing there listening to John Wooden, and of course he was not happy because Oregon had just beaten UCLA, and those
Wow.
were the years that UCLA never lost.
Oh,
And so
wow.
he had his famous rolled up program, and he was hitting it in his hand. He was not too happy to have lost, but great experience for me. John McKay, who was a USC football coach at the time, that was interesting.
Man,
And
oh man. I'm just thinking to myself, the parable about the master that gives 5 to one, 2 to another, 1 to the third, each to their own abilities. And of course, we are in charge of our skill and ability. And here you are refining it and refining it and refining it. Now, do you come out of school and just go, I'm just a sports writer? That's where I'm headed. I mean, it's exciting to me to figure out, how do we get from here to over 100 books? Like, what's the next step? What happens next?
well, it's really a miracle that the Lord orchestrated, because after graduation, I had my degree in journalism. Um, I thought I'd come back to San Diego,
This
and
is 1978,
this is 1975.
75. Okay.
Okay, 1975.
Okay.
And so I had some good contacts at the San Diego Union Tribune. In fact, during high school, the San Diego Union editor, a guy named Fred Kinney, was a tennis enthusiast. And he used to invite maybe 4 or 5, 6 boys to show up in downtown San Diego on Saturday mornings, and he would drill us, run us through drills. And so I got to know Fred very well. In fact, he gave me a tour of the San Diego Union when I was in high school. And so I kind of hung around the newsroom.
All right.
And so when I graduated, I went back to Fred and said, "Hey, Fred, I'm here. Got my degree now." And he got me into the front door. And at that time, in the mid 70s, there was a recession going on.
Big time.
This was after the oil shock.
Yep.
Do you remember
gas lines?
Gas lines. They changed interstate speeds to 55 miles an hour.
Yep.
And so there was really a recession. And the San Diego Union, in the evening paper, they actually had 2 papers, a morning and an afternoon paper. Those are the ones I was trying to get on. And so Fred got me on the front door. They only had one position open, and it was for a kind of reporter in training type thing, where you would work a month or 6 weeks on the city hall beat, and then you go try sports, and then they put you in politics, and then maybe on local news, and they kind of see what you're skilled at.
Right.
And I heard that there were 84 applicants, and I went down to the final 2. And they asked me a question of, did I have any interest in being a copy editor? Which was, those are the guys that are sitting around what they call the horn, and they're handed copy to edit, and they look at it, check it, do their thing, punctuation, capitalization, style, that type of thing.
Make it more attractive, basically.
Make it more attractive, and then hand it off to production. And I said, well, no, I kind of wanted to be out in the field. This was Bernstein and Woodward days.
Big time, buddy. Big time.
Boy, you really made your bones if you were a hotshot investigative reporter.
Some of them were actually honest and objective. Who'd have thunk?
Yeah, right. A lot more than they are today.
Yeah, amen. We'll try not to go there, but yeah.
Right. So I really wanted to be out in the field. I didn't want to be editing someone else's copy. I wanted to write it. So I basically said that very gently and said, no, I prefer to be a reporter. And so the other guy got the job.
Oh, my goodness.
So I thought, oh, okay, well, what do I do now?
Now what?
And so I was teaching tennis to kind of keep body and soul together. Again, I was a tennis player in high school growing up in La Jolla. I played at the University of Oregon. And so I was a college player, and that was a lot of fun. So I had taught at tennis camps in La Jolla during the summer when I was in college, so I knew something about teaching the game.
Mm-hmm.
So I could do a few lessons, and you make a good hourly rate, even though
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
you can only work 2 or 3 hours a day or 4 hours a day. So I was making enough to keep body and soul together. And my parents did a crazy thing. They sold their house in La Jolla and moved to a ski area called Mammoth Lakes, California.
I know it well.
You do?
Oh yeah, I'm an ex-ski instructor and I'm a tennis fanatic, by the way. And so that's one of the things that's always been fun. I mean, I've seen you ski all over the world with your beautiful bride, so I'm a little jealous, but absolutely. In fact, I know that I think you wrote a book with Roscoe Tanner, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
So I lived in Maui briefly in, oh my goodness, when did I live there? 92, I think. 92 to 94. And I was at the Kapalua Tennis Club. And I was just living, eating, breathing. I just took 2 years off and just hung out in Maui, basically. And Roscoe was there. And at the time, and correct me if I'm wrong, didn't he have the world's fastest serve back then?
Yes.
I know so little about sports,
Yeah,
but
no,
I know
no.
a fair amount
He
of.
had the biggest serve that was recorded. I think it was 153. I think
It was insane, and I just remember I was standing there, I was playing him, and I was trying to figure out. I've got to see which way it's going, forehand or backhand, because there's no chance I have if I don't know which direction, because it's already past me. So as soon as he throw the ball up, I'd try to watch the trajectory, and then I'd try to already be in that. It was ridiculous. And I remember one time it hit my racket, and my racket fell out of my hand. And I went, okay, well, that's new. That's new.
Wow, I had a similar experience a few years earlier. I was playing a tennis tournament, the Mammoth Open, and Roscoe was about 2 or 3 years off the tour. And as a favor to a friend, he agreed to play doubles with some friend from LA.
Right.
And my mom was the tournament director, and there were all these whispers around the Snow Creek Athletic Club. Roscoe Tanner's here. Well, this would have been about 89.
Mm.
Well, it's only 10 years removed from when he lost to Bjorn Borg in the Wimbledon finals.
That's right.
And so he goes up to my mom at the tournament desk and says, is anyone around that I can warm up and hit some balls with? And I look behind me and go, I didn't see anybody. So I raised my hand. I said, sure, I'll hit with you. And so we go out to a side court, and all of a sudden about 25 people follow us.
That's right.
And we're hitting and having a good time. And all of a sudden, you mind if I hit a few serves? And just like you, all of a sudden it's that famous serve you've seen so much on TV, the low toss, the left-handed thing. And all of a sudden the ball was going by me about head height.
Yeah.
I mean, how's it go that high, bounce that high?
Yeah, and you probably have been like a 4 or 5 player, so you really appreciate it more than the average, bear. My goodness, that's when you realize there's next levels in life that you're just never going to be. All right, so we got on that one, but let me understand. So now the transition is to what? I mean, I got to hear what happens. You didn't get the job. That's devastating when you're 21.
My parents moved to Mammoth.
Yeah.
My dad wanted to build some spec homes up there, and they sold their house that was 7 houses from the beach. It was not, by this time, they bought, it was a 50-foot wide lot. It was a Spanish home built in 1937. It was nothing fancy, but the proximity to the beach
was everything.
Yeah, everything. And they paid all of $37,000 for it in 1967.
Yeah.
I just looked it up recently. I think it's 2.75 million.
That's just crazy.
But same house. It hasn't been torn down yet. But anyway, they sold out. And so I'm teaching tennis during the summer, not really doing much. And we go into October and November and realizing that, tennis is starting to slow down even in San Diego.
Sure. And
my parents said that they could get a job for me working at Mammoth Mountain Ski Area in the office. And, I could do that for a while, for a few months. So it was easy. I could move in with them, and so I did that. And I worked at the ski area selling lift tickets.
Mm.
And I worked the cash window. And that was the old days where you had a kind of a round wheel.
Yep.
And
Yep. I remember it.
You put your $20 there. And I can remember the 1976, 1975, lift tickets were $13.
Jeez. Yes.
And I was in Mammoth a month ago, and the walk-up price was $195.
I used to ski instruct now I'm aging myself, in the Squaw Valley in 1978. So I'm familiar. Very, very
Okay.
familiar.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, you may have run into my wife on a ski race sometime.
I've seen her ski on Facebook. She can still outski me.
Yeah, no. But so I had this brilliant idea. Lift tickets are $13, right?
Right.
Well, after selling 1,000 of these and putting a 5 and 2 ones out there, and then the ticket, and then spinning the wheel,
Mhm.
I thought, wasn't there a thing called the $2 bill?
Right.
And so I asked, hey, can we order some $2 bills and get them in here? So we got some $2 bills. And so now with in those days, people didn't have credit cards. They all paid by cash.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm handing out $5 and $2 bills right and left for days. And then I ran into somebody, the merchants in town. They started saying, where are all these $2 bills coming from? And so, because they're being circulated all through Mammoth. Because
they come from you.
You're right. All the silly idea of using $2 bills. So I started skiing. I skied. Obviously, I'm a poor skier, and I can get down the hill and everything, but I wasn't good enough to ever be a ski instructor or a race department or anything like that. But in the springtime, I hung out my shingle and started teaching tennis, and I did freelance for the local newspaper, 1 or 2 articles. They had a summer and a winter magazine. Maybe I wrote an article for them, but I always wanted to be hired, but they couldn't hire me. And then I met this really cute instructor.
From Europe.
From Europe. She was from Switzerland. She had a cute accent. And it was in March of 1978.
Wow.
And she came from a tennis family, and her dad was a tennis official in Switzerland, part of the tennis association.
Sure.
And he said there's these things called the Prince racket. That's when they first came out. Remember those, Michael?
They looked like the side of a building. They were so big. Nobody knew what to do with them. Are they legal?
Yeah, they were the size of a snowshoe.
All right. I guess we had a little technical difficulty, but oh my gosh, welcome back, Mike Yorkey. I'm so sorry to the audience, but I'm sure the brilliant editors here will put it all together and make it wonderful. So, and I'm also concerned that this $1 billion TriCaster we have might blow up again. So let's try to get to the meat and potatoes here. So, when does life suddenly end up as the author? Even though I'd rather spend time on tennis than skiing, actually. The author, Mike Yorkey, when does that come into play?
Well, it really, before we interrupted, I was talking about how I met Nicole.
Yes.
And so obviously it was love at first sight, all those things. And we got married a year later. In Switzerland at a castle outside of Zurich. It's just as exotic or special as you think it would be.
Oh my goodness.
And honeymooned in Paris and London, even though we didn't have that much money. And I remember our hotel in Paris, it was a really crummy bed. And we'd get into it and we'd sink down and hit each other in the middle.
Which is where you want to be on the honeymoon anyway. Come on, let's get real.
Right. So we lifted up the bed. It was a chain link fence underneath.
Oh, those French innovators.
So I ran a tennis camp in the summer. and then Nicole taught skiing, and I worked for the ski area and sold a little real estate,
Perfect.
and we had that going. And after a year of marriage, Nicole said, "Well, why don't we move to Switzerland? Um, if we have children, that way you'll understand my culture. You could learn the languages." Nicole
Sure.
now speaks 5 languages
Wow. Wow.
fluently. So
Wow.
she is really fun to be in Europe with, obviously. But
She's like Melania Trump, man. I love it.
yeah, no, she speaks Swiss German, which is her native tongue, uh, High German or regular German, which is a different language.
It is.
A
I
lot
know.
of people don't.
I'm familiar.
Okay, a lot of people don't know that, but I'm glad you do. Her French is really it's fluent, totally fluent, because her parents had a chalet in the French-speaking part, so she went to the French-speaking part every weekend to ski. So she had her friends in French,
Bingo.
and then she learned Italian, and then English was her 5th language. So she thought it'd be a good idea that if we went over there, have a little bit of fun. I could learn some French and Swiss German, blah, blah, blah. So we moved to Geneva. And I remember I had to get my work permit.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've been there about 3 weeks, and I had a little high school French, but, it really was
whole different deal.
No. And so I went to this government bureaucrat thing, and I kind of understood that I was supposed to go somewhere and get a tuberculosis shot. Okay. So I got the address and figured out where I had to go, and I got on the tram and the bus and went to this industrial part of town. And it was a kind of a industrial green type of building, and walked in, and there were you could tell it was a national social type thing going on. And all these nurses were running around yelling at these men and I to get our shirts off and get in line to have a x-ray taken. And I was standing in line with a lot of Turks and Yugoslavs and Italians. And because these were the people who were getting work permits to work in Switzerland. And I remember thinking, gee, I'm kind of being treated. I'm a foreigner, and don't they know that I grew up in La Jolla?
Yeah.
And I'm a La Jolla kid, and I shouldn't be treated this way.
That's right.
It was a very humbling experience, obviously a very learning experience, but got through it. And I worked for a downtown sporting goods store in my limited French. I had to use my hands sometimes to say what I wanted to do, if I wanted to break, to go to the bathroom or whatever. But eventually, that's how you learn. It was immersion.
Sure.
And then we were living with Nicole and her brother and his fiance, and they're Swiss Germans. So I would come home after hearing French all day. My head was about ready to explode. And they're yapping away in Swiss German, which is from being over there, it's a completely different language.
Right.
And first week or so, Nicole kind of translated, told me what was going on. But after that, she got tired of that and said, "You're on your own." So, but, I learned a lot of Swiss German. So it's a great learning experience. But after a year in Geneva, and then I got a job teaching tennis in Zurich at the largest indoor tennis club in Switzerland. They had 11 courts. And I could teach all the lessons I want, but I got tired. I mean, who wants to teach 30, 40 hours a week?
Sure.
And
did you feel the nagging thing that you have this writing skill and it's just sort of sitting on a shelf at that point?
Yes, I did. I was 27 years old, and I looked at these other pros they were just kind of like Ottomans.
Yeah.
They were just kind of feeding the balls. Their eyes were barely open.
Yep, I've seen them.
And I said, do I want to be there in 20 years? So I said, Nicole, I think I'd like to move back. Can we move back to Mammoth and see what happens? And so she said, sure. And So we moved back to Mammoth that summer, 1982. And I went back to the local newspaper and said, "Hey, you got any work? Got any jobs for me?"
I'm back.
Back. I knew the guy.
Yeah.
And J. Cole was his name. And he said, "Well, don't have anything full-time, but we do need somebody on Tuesday nights." Because it was a weekly newspaper, and that's when they put the newspaper to bed, as they used to call it back then.
Right.
And they needed people to write captions and headlines and help produce the newspapers, because then it got put on a truck and driven up to Carson City, Nevada, where it got printed, and it came back on Thursday. So I said, fine. So I started working Tuesday nights there. And this is how gracious the Lord is. In September, when I had to kind of close down my tennis shop because snow's coming and nobody wants to play tennis.
Sure.
It's getting cold and
seasonal business.
Yeah, the Eastern Sierra. I got a job full time there, and I think I paid $2,000 a month. Yeah, so $2,000 a month, but we were living in a little guest house that was on my parents' property. And so the rent was really good. And I think it was $150 a month.
Wow.
So we could make it.
Sure.
And then Nicole had our first child in December of 82. And by the following spring, I was promoted to editor of the newspaper. And this is how gracious the Lord is. I mentioned investigative reporting before, right?
Sure,
Everyone
right.
Woodward and Bernstein.
Their heart's desire.
Right. I got a phone call in December of 82 from some guy. He didn't identify himself, but he said, "You need to investigate the Mono County chairman of the board for the supervisors. The supervisors like the town council.
Sure.
They ran Mono County, where Mammoth was located. And this guy said that the chairman of the board of supervisors owed a lot of money in back taxes and court judgments against him. And I needed to find that out and report it." Well, what do you do with that? I mean, this guy, his name was Michael Jenks. He was the most powerful person politically in the county. He was an appointee of Jerry Brown, and so that means he had some friends in Sacramento, that type of thing.
You start carrying weapons at that point, I think, don't you?
Right. I probably should have. But, so how do you investigate before the internet?
Yeah.
These days, you just type in his name and...
What a change. What a change.
Court judgments, and there they are. You can look up, you can find out if he was late on a check or he didn't pay his rent. Yep. But back then, didn't know what to do, so I told my boss that I needed to go to San Francisco and go to the courthouse downtown San Francisco and look for court judgments against them.
Sure.
And so I got permission to do that, and I did that, and I got a lot of copying fees. And I found out, sure enough, he was behind to the IRS. He had judgments against him. Sure enough, he owned a law firm, and he didn't pay for furniture and back rent and that type of thing. So malfeasance, I guess you could say.
Sure.
And I brought that all material back, and then I started calling people that were owed money by him. Well, and it didn't take very long for those people then to call Michael Jenks and say, some reporter was calling me.
Right.
And so I started feeling the heat. And but I think I had the story, and the publisher stuck by me, and I kind of knew that if the story didn't stick, I was a goner.
Sure. A lot on the line for a guy that age.
It was 28 years old and new child, few months old, and what do I do if I get fired? Blah, blah, blah. But the story got printed, and it stuck, and the local citizens rose up in arms and started a recall campaign. And the following November, he was recalled. And that was a big deal. So as the editor of a hometown newspaper, I always look for ways to kind of get good news stories into the newspaper.
Sure.
And we were going to a little First Baptist church that met at the Sierra Nevada Inn on Old Mammoth Road.
Unbelievable.
It's a little hotel resort complex. And there were usually, we joked, about 12 people there and just as many husky dogs. And one Sunday, this would have been the early, about 1983, 84, we had two visitors. And a guy stuck his hand out. Obviously, in a congregation of 12, two visitors kind of stand out. And he said, "Hi, my name is James Dobson. This is my wife, Shirley."
Unbelievable.
And I said, "Well, I had heard of Dr. Dobson. In fact, some friends, Dave and Stevie Nelson, had handed me one of his books 6 months earlier."
I assume he was already, we've had a couple of technical difficulties, so we're moving cameras around here. I assume that he was already on the radio and a big deal by then?
He was on the radio. He had started Focus on the Family in 1977.
Oh my goodness.
Kind of
a newbie.
This is the early years, really gaining traction. He started a magazine, a lot of tapes being sent out. And this was really the early 80s when things were really going up quickly.
Big time.
For Dr. Dobson. And so, but I had never heard of Focus on the Family. I just knew that I'd read one of his books. It was called What Wives Wish Their Husbands Knew About Women.
I read that book when I was in my 20s. I don't think I applied it because I don't belong to the First Wives Club like you. And God bless you that you do. It's a much better journey, I believe. So does he offer
it? And Nicole noticed. She said, "Why are you treating me so nice?" And I said, "Well, I kind of understand your monthly cycles a little bit better." And she says, "Well, keep reading that book."
Now, does he offer you a job right there?
No.
Okay.
We would maybe run into each other a few months. Dr. Dobson owned a second home, a condominium at Snow Creek.
Wow.
And his kids were in high school. So these were really the ski years for his kids. So he probably came up every 3 weeks, I would say. And
Mike, I'm sorry. You guys, this obviously just really messed up in my head, this static. I'm pretending like it's not going to hit the recording. Oh, it's going to hit the recording? It's not going to hit the recording. Then I don't care. I can live with it. Because we're having the most, you're probably the lowest maintenance guest we've ever had. And we've never had this level of problem, man. I don't know what to tell you. And I hate this angle, by the way. It makes me look like about 45 pounds heavier.
No, you look like, and I mean this in a good way, Orson Welles.
I don't really know how you can make that look good, but okay. So listen, I'm just gonna keep going and ignore what's going on in my head because it suddenly hit me. I've been ignoring this for 40 minutes, but if it's gonna hit the recording and we can't take it, but as long as you guys say it's good. So anyway, they're giving me the green light. All right. So you are now with the infamous Dr. James Dobson, and the trajectory of his entire life is just going off the Richter scale. You're reading his first book, but he doesn't offer you a job. Does the relationship just start there? What happens?
Well, a bit of a relationship, and I knew that. I think in 1984, maybe in 1985 or so, he entered the Mammoth Open tennis tournament.
Oh my goodness! Okay,
the same, usually about 600. There were about 600 entries. I mean,
I don't know why I'm laughing. I for some reason just don't picture him playing tennis, and I don't know why I feel that way. No idea.
He played at Pasadena College.
Oh my goodness, didn't know that.
He played in college, back in the day. I mean, this is the old wood rackets and white
Oh, yeah.
tennis whites and all that. And he, as a little bit of a segue, one of his famous talks or speeches was about how he really wanted to win the championship for Pasadena College, the best player there. And he finally did it his senior year, and they gave him this trophy. And then, 30 years later, they bring him back. He's now the famous James Dobson, this and that.
Right.
And he's looking for his trophy, and for some reason, he was led to a back room, and it was in a trash can. And he used that to say that life trashes your trophies. Not to get too hung up on it. But anyway, Dr. Dobson liked to play. He didn't play a lot of tennis. Obviously, he was a very busy guy. And so I asked him, I said, well, can I do a little article on you playing the Mammoth Open Tennis Tournament? Because again,
Bingo.
When the editor of a local newspaper, you're kind of scratching for news, right? And I thought, well, a local author plays local famous author or second homeowner. That's it. He's not a local. He's second homeowner. Plays local tournament. And so I interviewed him for his tennis, and he had been interviewed, of course, hundreds of times.
Sure.
But never for his tennis. So I think he got a kick out of it. I wrote the article. I sent it to him. And so we kind of teased each other about it each time we ran into each other. So then, I don't know, about late 85, 86, I'm 3 or 4 years into being the editor of the Mammoth newspaper, and I'm looking to move on. In fact, I'm ready for the LA Times. I'm convinced of it. The LA Times can't wait to hire me.
That's right.
Yeah. And so, or maybe some other big time, the Orange County Register,
the Register,
or San Diego Union, or something like that. So I put my feelers out. Couldn't even get an interview. And then suddenly I saw in the LA Times want ads a position for associate editor, focus on the family magazine.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, all right. So I wrote a cover letter, included my resume, talked about how I knew Dr. Dobson. I'm sure that he'll vouch for me. I'm your guy. I mean, I didn't hold back. And I sent it off, and a month passes by.
Not a good sign. Never a good sign.
No. Then 2 months passes by. And then finally I get a letter back in the mail. And it's one of those, dear brother in Christ.
Dear brother John.
we regret to inform you that the position's been filled, and
Wow.
Okay, I guess that wasn't. So a couple more months pass, and I run into Dr. Dobson at Snow Creek Athletic Club. And I teased him. I said, did you know that I applied for a job with you guys and all I got was a form letter back? And he said, you're joking. And I said, yeah, no, I'd love to work for you guys. And he said, well, I'm up here with a lot of my vice presidents. Roth Sanderson heads our editorial area. Why don't I have you meet with him? And so I did meet with him that weekend. And he kind of asked me if I'd be interested in reading manuscripts. What for? Well, we're thinking of starting a book division. Oh, that's not writing. But I said, well, maybe I would. But he said, well, I'll tell you what you need to do is come down and take a look at us.
Earlier in your career, you kind of said no to that in a certain way, because it wasn't manuscripts, but it was copy editing, right?
Copy editing. Yeah, I wanted to write.
You kind of said no to almost the same thing, and it's like, don't do this again.
Well, it didn't sound nebulous. It didn't sound sure, and he said they were thinking about it. He just kind of threw it out there, and I didn't, it was like bait, but I didn't jump out of the water at it for sure, but I didn't turn it down. But he said, you know what, why don't you just come by, focus and see who we are, and we'll get to know you better. Okay. So about a month later, I did make the drive. They were in Arcadia those days. in Southern California near Pasadena. And I met with Rolf and a guy named Rick Christian, who was the editor of Focus on the Family magazine. And we just kind of talked for an hour or so, and then we went out to lunch, and nothing was offered to me. But I just said that, yeah, I'm interested in working for you guys. And then about a month later, Nicole and I seem to have this faint memory of, we said something's going to happen here. I don't know if it's the Holy Spirit's prompting or whatever. And sure enough, I got a phone call from Rolf saying that we would like to offer you the become editor of Focus on the Family magazine. And Rick Christian's going to move over to our new book division.
Bingo.
Well, I mean, this is the Lord. When I got turned down for associate editor, that was the entry level position.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the bottom of the totem pole. And now I get to go in as editor of a magazine at that time that had a circulation of 1 million.
Unbelievable.
And I was editor of a weekly publication with a circulation of 12,500. So
tough decision.
Yeah, I said sure.
Did I get this right? The Focus on the Family was in Southern California at the time? They weren't in Colorado?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you do now? Do you have to move to Southern California?
Yep, got to move to Southern California.
Bingo, you're going back home.
And
sort of.
My parents had moved back to the San Diego area, so they were thrilled. And so we moved to Monrovia, which is right next door. We couldn't afford Arcadia. That's a pretty expensive area. But we had a little house rental in Monrovia, and that went really well, and I grew on the job. It was
How long were you there?
I was there 11 years.
Oh my goodness.
And
so like 85 to 96?
86, may have 86.
To like 97, 98?
Yeah, 97. May have August of 97.
And I think we met around 99. So I can only imagine, not to quote the song. Wow, that was a weird serendipitous moment. I actually had interesting journey with health, and one of them was I had a pericardium attack in what year was that? I think it was 2001, and I decided to write an executive weekend getaway to really help executives grow as I was recovering, with no place to share it, no engagements, no nothing, and out of the blue, Cook Ministries, which is out of Colorado Springs, and I believe that's where Focus on the Family is. That song was out, I Can Only Imagine. And I was lost. I was trying to get there. There was a room full of executives waiting for me to do my thing. And I pulled into this parking lot, and I was just sobbing. I couldn't believe I was out of bed. I couldn't believe I still had a heart. I thought I was dying. And I was listening to I Can Only Imagine, and I looked up, and I realized I'd pull into the parking lot of Focus on the Family. and it was just this, I don't know, this whole moment just flashed back in my head. During that 11 years, you must have met a whole lot of God's generals. Am I right?
It was, I remember Steve Largent coming through, and people probably don't recognize that name today, but he was a top NFL receiver.
Yes, he was.
Set all-time records. But after he retired from the NFL, he went into politics. And so he would come in for to tape a show with Dr. Dobson. And so he was a very good tennis player, Steve Largent. And so the vice presidents, a couple of them played tennis, and they needed a fourth. Well, I was there raising my hand.
That's right. I got game, boys.
Well, not only that, I'm getting paid to play tennis.
That's right.
That's the way I looked at it. So it was a lot of fun. Obviously, Billy Graham didn't come through, but I think Franklin Graham did. Amy Grant. I mean, a lot of people came through.
Oh yeah.
It was a heady time for Focus on the Family, really. And I was there about 2 or 3 years, and the story I heard was that Focus was looking at moving because the cost of doing business was getting so high in
Yeah,
California.
still is.
And
It's ridiculous.
it's ridiculous. And I believe the California Franchise Tax Board, the sales tax people,
Sure.
wanted to slap a 7% tax on every book that went out. And of course, Focus argued that these were donations.
Sure.
It was not a sale. And, that would be like a couple $1 million hit.
Mm-hmm.
Focus said, fine, well, we'll start looking out of state. And in 1991, Focus said, we're moving to Colorado Springs. I knew where Denver was. I didn't know where Colorado
Yeah,
Springs was.
right. It's a beautiful
But,
place. Beautiful place.
We decided to make the move. It's a good idea if you want to keep your job, too. So we willingly moved to Colorado Springs. They were great years. And I grew with Focus. This was the time when Focus was adding magazines, Brio and Breakaway for the teen boys and girls, Clubhouse Junior, Single Parent Family, Pastor's Family, Citizen. And I had my fingers almost in all of them.
I can't imagine the life at that moment in time. And then somehow, and I can't wait to hear this part, you segue to becoming this brilliant, unbelievable author. What was that transition? It had to be scary because you must have loved being I would imagine as a believer, being there was like the Mecca. And all of a sudden, did you get a book offer? Did you decide to do your own? What was the moment?
Was more unusual than that. One day, it probably would have been 1990, 91 or so, before we moved to Colorado Springs. We're in Pomona at the headquarters there. And Greg Johnson, who was the editor of Breakaway magazine for teen boys, we were both about the same age, mid-30s. And we had kids in the 7 to 8-year-old range. And he said, he came to my office one day and said, we should write a book. And I kind of looked again around the office to see if there was somebody else there, because I had never thought about writing a book in my life. And he said, no, we should gang up and we should write a book together for busy dads on how they can be better dads. I said, oh. And at the time, Focus on the Family had a lot of reps that went around the country, and their job was to thank large donors and Fred make for Focus on the Family. And so that put them into contact with some great people. So our idea was to find out the 50 best dads in the country, told to us by these Focus on the Family reps.
I like it. And
interview them and ask them, what makes a great dad? How can you be a better dad? And we did a questionnaire and followed it up with interviews. And basically the takeaway point that we shared in this book, it was called Daddy's Home, was that the most important hours of a day for a dad are between 5 and 9. And if you're not there between 5 and 9, you're really missing out on family time, on children's, because if you're getting there at 7:30, the kids have eaten and they've already had their baths and they're just going down. If you get down at 8:30, they're asleep.
Yep.
So it was a reminder that really somehow if you can get home by 5:30, even if that means going into work a little bit earlier, you're going to be a much better dad, much more involved dad. And so this book, Daddy's Home, came out in 92. It was kind of the start of the so-called men's movement. Promise Keepers started in 92.
Right.
So we kind of caught a wave. And the book did pretty well. And everyone was happy. And so when a book does well, guess what? They're asking, what's your next book?
That's right. So what happens next?
Yeah, what happens next? Oh, that's funny. That's not the, you're showing people the cover that's not the real cover. That's interesting.
I don't know. It's
Um,
what I think that's
yeah, no,
Amazon.com
no,
too.
yeah, no, no. That's correct. That was me, and that was the book. Um, so um, so that led to a 2-book contract to do 2 more books together.
Hmm.
Took us up, so I could do 1 book a year with a full-time job at Focus on the Family.
Hmm.
So I wrote it now at nights and on weekends, and I could do 1 more book. And so this went on for a couple years. I was doing kind of 1 book a year, and let's see, in '97, I got a job offer to come out to San Diego for at Families, and I think you remember them,
I
Michael.
do. I do.
Right?
I was part of the strategic think tank on that team. Yeah.
Sure.
I was a consultant to that group. Great concept.
And great concept. Unfortunately, it didn't work.
Unfortunately, it didn't work.
And so I left a really good job at Focus on the Family on the startup, but again, it was in San Diego. I wanted to be back in Southern California, close to my parents. We had lost my brother. I only had one sibling. His name was Pry, were his initials, Peter Richard.
I've seen him on Facebook, memoriams things.
Yeah,
Put it.
right.
Yeah.
So he died in brain cancer in 1988. So I was the only child left. So it would be nice if I could come back to San Diego.
Yeah.
So started working for At Families. Unfortunately, they couldn't continue paying the employees, and I was like Cortez. I had sailed my ship into San Diego Bay and
and burned it.
Burned it. And so I called Greg Johnson. Remember, I wrote Daddy's Home with him, and Greg had become a literary agent.
Bingo.
And I said, Greg, I need some work here. You got anything? And he said, well, I think I can keep you busy. And he said that in, August of '98. And I've been busy ever since.
Unbelievable. Now, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there it is. There's Daddy's Home.
You know what? I like that one a lot better.
Yeah.
A lot better.
That's a real cover.
So here's what I want to dive into. So it's been my experience, and especially when I get to, I've had the privilege in life of becoming good friends with a lot of my mentors. And somebody I really want you to meet is Dr. Jim Richards. Have you ever met Dr. Jim Richards from Huntsville, Alabama? Guy's just beyond brilliant.
No, I haven't.
But you end up getting so much out of these and being around these amazingly gifted people, and it made me process your life a little bit, thinking to myself, I don't know, the most famous books group I know about you is Every Man's Battle, though I don't know that's the number one seller. So take us through the process. Like, do you just integrate yourself? Do you sit down and interview these people you must have down to the notch process by now. What's the process? You decide you're going to help me. I've got all this data. How do I download my data into your brain and have it come out being amazing? Is it a dance of some sort?
It is kind of a dance. I don't know how I do it, but
yeah, you do.
Well, obviously we decide if I'm going to write a book for Michael Besson and he wants to tell his story, or
I like the way that sounds. I think we need to do
that. We talk about, okay, what's the takeaway value here? What do you want? Is it just a straight memoir about your life and you want to inspire people and tell people what you learned? Or is there a teaching going on? And you teach via stories about your life. I did this, or here's where I messed up, or here's where things went well. And so we decide on an outline. It might not be as involved as you think. It might just be, it's gone from cocktail napkins to usually 2-3 pages. And then I start interviewing you and asking you for stories and questions and teaching and insights, get it transcribed. Sometimes I do the transcription myself. Nicole will sometimes do it, or I'll pay somebody. And then I spread it all out, and I try to put it into buckets, meaning the bucket for the first chapter and the bucket for the second chapter.
Mm.
And if I've got like maybe 5 or 6 stories for that first chapter, I look for the grabber story, something that will hook people. And I kind of started with that, and I keep playing with it. It usually goes through 7 rewrites. The first time I go through, it's not very good, but it gets there.
Wow.
So
wow.
That's a little bit pretty much how it happens.
I've read 3 or 4 of your books, and they're beyond great. So I can't recommend to the audience enough any of your books, and we'll get to your last one soon here. But I was just thinking, I worked, I used to be Tony Robbins' vice president. I've seen a lot of his processes. One of the ways he does the way he does his books is he takes these big yellow, the stick-it notes that just come in little tiny things, right? I don't know where the camera is. Right? But now they have them, 3 feet wide by 4 feet. And he puts them up, and let's say there's 12 chapters. He puts just nothing but the chapters up there. And then over the course of a month or two, he just walks up to each one of those and starts adding ideas. And then before you know it, he's looking at the outline of the entire book, and then he fills it in from there. And I thought, wow, that's it in with stories. And he has to walk into that room every day, and I thought, wow, I could write a book if I just did that. Could be possible.
You mentioned Every Man's Battle.
Yes.
Can I tell you a story about Every Man's Battle?
I would love to hear
miracle. It. Yeah. So you've heard about how I went to At Families and was there several months, and the paycheck stopped, and of course wondering how am I ever going to, what am I going to do? I had kids in Christian private school.
Sure.
Miracles happened there. So after about 3 months, I decided to go back to the old At Families office and clear out my desk for good, because there was always the hope that new money would come in.
Sure.
But it just wasn't going to happen. And so I went back after 3 months, and there was a FedEx box on my desk. It was from a guy named Fred Stoeker. And I opened it, and I barely remembered who Fred Stoeker was, because about 2 or 3 years earlier, when I was at Focus on the Family magazine, I had printed a story of his in Focus on the Family magazine. It was a cute story about how he used Dr. Dobson's book, Preparing for Adolescence, with his 11-year-old son, Jason. And Fred wasn't a writer. He was a businessman, father of 4. And I liked the story. It's cute. And so I kind of rewrote it for him. So I did know the story. And it was just kind of a cute story about how he used Dr. Dobson's book. And I remember one line where his wife said, "You're not going to read page 135, are you?" And that was the page that describes what sexual intercourse is. And Fred said, "Well, it kind of was." "Oh, okay." So, it was just kind of a cute story that did well. Well, anyway, Fred had been teaching these principles that were every man's battle, basically, in a Sunday school class for years. And he felt God was wanting him to get that into a book form to get the word out. And so he took a stab at it. Again, he's not an author. And he wrote this 90,000-word book. And he said, "I don't know anybody in Christian publishing. The only person I know is Mike Yorkey." And I think he called Focus, and they gave him a forwarding address. So I took the FedEx box home, and I looked at it and go, that's kind of interesting. But, I'm scrambling. I had a $10,000 job from Greg, and I'm just trying to bring some money in the door.
Sure.
So I contacted Fred, and I said, "Well, I don't know if I can do this. I've gone without a paycheck for months, and this and that." And Fred says that I turned him down. I don't remember that. He says that when he hung up the phone, he cried like a baby.
Oh, man.
And the reason being is he said that God told him this book would go around the world.
Wow.
And its message would be shared.
How many copies has Every Man's Battle, the whole series, sold? Do you know?
Oh, it's over 2 million. I'm pretty sure it's over 2 million.
I would have thought even more than that. Yeah, it's just
It could be more. It could be more. I think Every Man's Battle is up to 1.5 million itself, and there's
wow.
11 books in the series.
Wow. I walked away with so many insights. I mean, one of them that really stuck with me and struck me was the brain chemistry factor when at the moment of orgasm it sort of impregnates you with certain chemicals that cause that image to be
Mm-hmm.
really special. And that's the way God designed us, right? To look at
Mm-hmm.
just one wife for life, which
Mm-hmm.
is the right way to do it and the best way to do it and the healthiest way to do it from a guy who hasn't succeeded in that. I know that for a fact. And when we depart from that and we have that experience with basically a piece of plastic, right, like a computer, we get addicted to something by the very process that God made to make our wives beautiful for the rest of our lives. Do I
Mm-hmm.
have that? I mean, it's just like, a
Yeah,
layman's kind of.
you have that, and it's fresh in my mind, and I'll tell you why. Because Fred and I, for the last year, have worked on a revision of Every Man's Battle,
Oh, wow.
and it's called the 20-year revision because it came out in '99.
Mm,
And Fred seeded in a lot of more of that brain
love it.
information
Love it. Love
because
it.
we've learned a lot more about how the brain works in the last 20 years. That's kind of one of the differences between the 1999 version and the
Is it
2019
done?
version.
Is it done yet? Or are you still in the process of
The
doing it?
revision,
Yeah.
the revision is done.
Okay.
It's not out yet. The revision is not
The
out
reason
yet.
I ask is and you need to meet this guy. Dr. Jim Richards is probably the preeminent mind. I don't think this always matters in life, but in his case, I believe he's got 3 PhDs, and one of them's in theology, one of them's in medicine, and one of them's in behavioral science. And because of that, there's a very unique thing. And anyway, the heart brain relationship and the cellular memory at a heart level is so important to understand because there's actually, the first mention in the Bible of the word heart is God. It's in the book of Genesis, I believe, and it talks about the thoughts in man's hearts. And of course, it goes into the whole Noah's Ark thing. Uh, but the power of that, well, what do you mean? What do you mean there's thoughts? There's actually cellular memory thoughts in your heart. And I think that the transformation out of that bondage has a lot to do with your heart being transformed and understanding the relationship between your head and your heart. And man, is he an expert at that. So it will be exciting to get you guys on the same page. When does that book come out? When is it coming out?
I hope it comes out this summer or in September.
Very good.
I've not heard when that happens, but it's a miracle it got printed because remember I turned Fred down.
Yeah.
And and then I called him back. Maybe he called me. I can't quite remember. No, I remember I felt like the Lord wanted me to help him. And so I believe I called him back and I said, Fred, I'd be glad to help you, but I got to charge you. So I said, I'll tell you what, because the manuscript needed, top to bottom.
A lot of work.
A lot of work. But the material was there. And so I said, I got to charge you. I'll do it for $5,000. And but I have to let you know that there's a good chance this will never get printed. Now, $5,000 is a lot of money for a young family man with 4 kids.
Sure, and it may never get printed.
I mean, it may never get printed.
Yeah.
And so he took a real risk. He said, "I'll send you $2,500 to get started. Go for it." And I whittled it down to $55,000. Sent it to Greg Johnson, and he said, "Wow, this is pretty good."
Wow.
Who's Fred Stoeker? So I, well, he's this guy focused on Family Magazine, and da-da-da. So, okay. So Greg then took it to Waterbrook Press, which happened to be in Colorado Springs, and they looked at it and said, wow, this is pretty good.
Who's Fred Stoeker?
Right. And they said, well, we gave him the story. And so Waterbrook Press and Greg came up with an idea. They said, we need to put a name on
Right.
cover. They weren't
That's where Steven came into play.
Steve Arterburn came in. And so, Mike, you'll go back, you'll interview Steve, you'll seed in some of his stories, rework the book some. We'll have it come out by you. Steve can talk about it on his radio show, New Life, and we'll all be one happy family. And that's what happened.
My goodness gracious. And it's changed lives all over the world.
It's pretty cool.
I cannot overstate that. Even my 12-year-old daughter is reading every teenager's battle, I think is what hers is, or maybe it's designed just for girls.
Yeah, there may be a teen girls version.
I think it's teen girls. I saw it on a thing and I went, oh my gosh. I'll tell you something else that's blowing me away right now. I hesitated to say it, but I was a strategic advisor to that startup. I was never really a part of it per se, but I was a consultant on the team, and I had no idea. I knew the story about you went somewhere and the company didn't work out. I didn't know it was that company until this. And now I'm realizing it's so cool when you're in God's hands and he's just saying, yeah, this is what it looks like, but you have no idea what it looks like. It's what it looks like to you. I had no
idea.
But you have no idea what it looks like to me. And so I'm flashing back. I think we're at Ruth Chris. I can't remember where we had. I think that's where we had dinner, in Costa Mesa. But I remember just walking away from there thinking that is a gifted man. That man is God's got his hand on him.
Kind.
No, I never, Mike. I never forgot that day. So let me. So here's the thing that when I have great people that impact my life, I tend to take on part of their stuff that I've learned from them, and it becomes part of who I am. I can't imagine all that's dancing through your head. So let me just understand the numbers first. You have authored, or I don't know what it's called, co-authored, over 100 books now. What's the number? You got to know the number.
I think it's 109, but I'm not sure.
109. Oh my goodness. Top three. The top three sellers. Top three that have impacted you the most, that you walked away impacted by their story, their experience, the whole thing. Which one? What would they be if I made you say the top three?
Well, Every Man's Battle, of course.
Okay.
I love the one that's coming out April 2nd, The Shot Caller.
I'm excited about that. And by the way, I as I told you in the email, we want to get Casey on the show. We want to support you.
You've got to have Casey on the show. You've got to.
I'm a little afraid of him, but I love him because he's a brother in Christ. But
well, he's a teddy bear now. 30 years ago, if you saw him on the same sidewalk, you'd want to get to the others across the street real quick.
Yeah, and we're sitting here looking at this, and I can only imagine. I read his story about his gang life on the streets, and then of course when he was in prison, and I'm thinking, man, this guy played full on. He was like David. I mean, he just played full on. And so if he's playing full on in the streets and now he's playing full on for God, he's probably got a crazy cool story, right? Mm-hmm. So as I'm looking at, can you scroll back up on the top there? Jordan Rubin. I thought that guy was really, really on top of his game. He seems to have disappeared a little bit from my stuff that I'm looking at these days. Mm-hmm. But did you learn a lot from him about your health?
Oh, yeah. No, that was a great association over a 5-year period. I wrote 22 books for Jordan.
Oh, my goodness.
And he was a natural health, organic food type of guy.
Yeah.
Nutritional supplements.
I think we all should be. I think we all should be today.
I mean, he helped me clean up my act for sure.
Oh my goodness.
And great experiences. He sold Garden of Life.
Yeah, I know. I heard.
And then started. He bought a big ranch in southern Missouri.
Yeah.
And I've been trying some things, and so. I haven't heard from Jordan from over a year, so I'm kind of wondering what he's up to.
Well, when you check in with that, I'd love to meet the guy.
Yeah, I love the guy, and I'd be glad to help you get in touch with him. He's fascinating. He's really quite knowledgeable in the health space, as they say.
Oh, man, he is. He is. Now, I went sideways on you with that one. So we got Every Man's Battle. We've got The Shot Caller. What are the top ones?
Well, I really liked After the Cheering Stops.
What's After the Cheering Stops, guys?
That's on my landing page. Um, and yeah, there it is. And
Cyndy
uh,
Feasel.
Cyndy Feasel, we were the first to market, so to speak, with an ex-NFL wife and CTE. In other words, we've all heard about CTE and how these poor NFL players,
Yeah.
they're just falling down dead at 45, 48, 52.
Yeah, I've heard a
Uh,
lot.
and the CTE is really debilitating. And what Cyndy's story, she tells that story through the eyes of an ex-NFL wife, what it was like not knowing that her husband had CTE and seeing the gradual changes in him, in her husband, Grant Feasel, who played 10 years for the NFL, who played 10 years on the line of scrimmage as a center, who played 10 years of just, after he snaps the ball, it's hit and hit.
Mm-hmm.
And she describes what it was like after he retired at age 32 until he died at age 52 of cirrhosis of the liver. He drank himself to death because the pain in his head. And this was an FCA guy. This was a Boy Scout, and they had never had alcohol in the home. And then his last season, the last few games, on a Sunday night, they'd be home, and all of a sudden, 8 o'clock after the game, Grant would say, "I'll be back in a minute." He'd go down to the convenience store and come home with a 6-pack of beer. And Cindy's looking at him going, "What? We never had alcohol in the home." And he'd pop one and finish it. He'd pop two until he drank all 6. And then he'd take all 6 empty bottles out to the trash can because he didn't want his 5-year-old son to see alcohol. Yeah. And that started a drinking problem to where he tried to hide it, which means using rum or like rum and Cokes,
right,
and vodka and Gatorade, that type of thing. So he's a closet drinker. But as we chronicle in the book, how Grant changed his mood, and by the last few years, it was a very sad situation. So Cyndy has taken that as a platform, and now she is leading the charge. And you'll notice that I just saw in the San Diego newspaper, they used to have 25 Pop Warner football teams. You know how many teams they got now?
No, I heard it's diminishing greatly.
Oh, it's like 2 or 3, 4. Parents are not
pulling their kids out.
No.
In fact, I've been reading where middle class and upper class parents, especially, are pulling them out, and it is the lower impoverished kids that are staying in the hopes of scholarships, and it's almost like we are, sacrificing our young impoverished neighborhoods to the god of scholarships, hopefully, and it's in a world of a lot of fake racism and fake sexism. This seems to be real.
It's happening. It's happening before our eyes right now, and football's going to have a real problem. They're going to have a problem drawing players for sure.
They are. They are,
and they will come out predominantly from the inner city, just like you said.
How many books a year, just generally speaking, are you working
on? Usually 3 or 4.
Wow.
This is an unusual time. I have about 5 going at the moment.
Well, we're going to talk about mine right after this. That'd be 6.
Right. Okay.
You have 5 simultaneously going on.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Do you have a staff now, or are you still the guy that does?
That's just me. I'm total freelance.
Wow.
Total freelance.
Wow.
But I never know when my next job is. But I've been living, by faith for 20 years, and
I think you can let go of that worry now. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Well,
in case you haven't.
I tell Nicole that I haven't missed a meal yet. So,
in case no one's told you, you're Mike Yorkey. So, all right. So tell me the next 1 or 2, and well, you know what I really want to hear. I'm curious, as I look at your life from the outside, and I look at a time of skill building. I wouldn't call it God's holding pattern, but there was a time where you just needed to accumulate the skill and ability And then I see perseverance and a great attitude, even when you didn't get gigs that you thought you probably should have gotten, i.e., the focus on the family at first, only to get a greater promotion at the end. Who knows? You might have not got that had you got the first one, right? You might have been bypassed or
Right.
something.
Exactly.
And I look now at the humility with which you dealt with the adversity of an organization that didn't quite turn out the way you wanted, and then you end up. What would you say are your takeaways from your journey with God? Because you are living an extraordinary life.
He is faithful. There are still down times. I've been fired a couple times.
Welcome to my world as a consultant.
Right, sure. I've done a couple books where that was not what they were looking for.
How do you handle that? How do you handle that? You put I don't know, 6 months into it, and they go, you missed the mark. What do you do right then? How do you handle that emotionally?
Yeah, oftentimes I ask if I can fix it, and then if they say no, we're going to get somebody else. I'm kind of down in the dumps for a few hours, maybe the rest of the day. And then I figure I say, Lord, you must have something else out there for me.
Yeah.
And these things, the old cliche, these things happen for a reason or whatever. I just, you're God, I'm not. Your thoughts are not my thoughts. I'll just keep plugging away. And some things work out. I always say that when God's working on one side of the equation, he's also working on the other side, meaning my side.
That's right.
And so for some reason, they decided to go a different direction. I've done books about NFL coaches, and that's what they always use, or NFL players. They don't tell you you're not on the team. They're saying, this is a player. We decided to go in a different direction. And that's the way of saying you're off the team. So I look at it that way. They decided to go in a different direction, and I'm just going to pick up something else and go after that one.
Who's I'm just really curious, because you've been used by God so mightily. Who's your top one or two influencers in your life? Like, who's really influenced your walk, your journey with God?
I thought you were going to talk about writing, and that would be a fellow named Bob Welch, who I went to school with, University of Oregon. We were reporting one together, and we've just been great buds, and we can talk to each other when he gets fired or I get fired or whatever.
Those lifelong kind of things are amazing.
Spiritual mentors. I've really enjoyed Dr. David Jeremiah.
Oh, wow.
And that's been a late association. I did a book recently that has not come out, but we hope will come out this summer. It is finished. It's called Luca's Light. And it's I wrote it for a family on commission. They paid me to do this. The Giordano's, they live in San Diego. And it's a sad story about how they lost their 16-year-old son to cancer. Now, I always kind of look for redeeming stories.
Sure, we all do. We all need redemption.
And this story was special because of what happened after Luca, their 16-year-old son, died. And there are some supernatural events that are kind of out of the miracles from heaven playbook, so to speak. And so we asked Dr. Jeremiah, who they go to his church, the Giordano's go to Shadow Mountain in El Cajon. And they had gotten to know Dr. Jeremiah during when their son was, really in the thick of it. And he agreed to do the afterward. And so I had some interaction with Dr. Jeremiah. I got to meet him, sit across from him. And I've now read some of his books, and he is, golly, man, is that guy.
Isn't it amazing? You've become friends with him, I assume.
I would say friends.
Acquaintances.
Acquaintances.
Yeah. He's impacted my life for certain, and so has his literary agent, Celia Yates. Do you know Celia
Stevie
Yates?
Yates, yeah,
Yeah.
he's a name that I know. I wouldn't say I'm friends with him, but we
Yeah,
do know each other. It's a small world a
we
little
sat
bit.
on a board together to help change America in a more godly way politically. That was rather interesting, and it's rather interesting that I even got to be a part of that. But when
Good
I
for you.
have you ever walked into Celia Yates' office?
No, he's in like Garden Grove or something
Yeah,
like that.
to me it's all LA, but
Yeah,
when you
right.
don't
Yeah,
live in LA,
right.
everything's LA. So
Sure.
I walk in and uh, I didn't really understand what he did before I met him. Actually, I just heard bits and pieces, and it's a library, and I mean it's got hundreds and hundreds of books from everybody you've ever heard. I go, boy, you like collecting books? He says, no, I represent all these people. It's just like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. I was there for a
He,
completely different
no,
reason.
no, no. He's probably done 1,000 or more deals for
Oh, and then
sure.
he's like, he takes me out to basically his library. He says, "Who do you love?" And well, I loved it. Okay, well, grab the book, grab the book, grab the book. Walked out of there with like a suitcase full of books. Great guy, great guy. In fact,
Yeah, yeah.
I reached out to him real recently because I want to reconnect with him. But well,
Good for you.
let me ask you this: what do you think some advice would be to people that are even trying to write and create their own book right now? I mean, the publishing world has changed. The publishing houses have changed. The world of self-publishing has emerged.
Hmm.
What kind of advice you getting given to people? Because there's all kinds of people who have a story inside of them, right? And they want to
Sure.
get it out, and they just don't know
Well,
how.
the barriers to publishing have really come down, and that's been the biggest change in the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
The change that I've had to make is that now I need to know how to put a book on Amazon.
Right.
And there are some people who come to me that I know that, especially Christian publishers, they have to be very picky on what they say yes to because
Sure.
um, in 1996 or so, there were about 6,500 Christian bookstores in the country.
Yep. Not anymore.
How many do you? I've heard there are 1,500 left.
It could be. I actually managed, I won't say the name of it, but the number one largest Christian marketing firm in America. I was brought in as a consultant, and they had some challenges. And at the time, let me think of what year this was. So late 90s, there was almost 10,000, depending on how you categorize them. And
Hmm.
I remember going to the CBA shows and
Oh yeah,
participating in
right.
that. But I'll tell you what I realized, as most of my clients are secular. Uh, there was just not a best practice business principles in motion. And I saw it so much. I went, we as believers are supposed to do things with excellence. I mean, that's what we're called to do. We're supposed to be super faithful, do things with all our heart, do things with a spirit of excellence. And I didn't see that in the retail. So I don't think it was just the retail shift. And I'm not trying to beat up Christians.
Hmm.
But I did see that thing happen. And I don't even know how many are open today, but it is crazy what's happened. Just
Yeah.
crazy. The same time, I know people who are leveraging the online world and the Amazon world and are just killing it. I mean, just
Hmm.
doing things they could
Yeah.
have never done before. So,
Yeah, and it's in many ways, it's if you're kind of entrepreneurial, like you can do better self-publishing.
yeah,
The dirty little secret in publishing is that the publisher made money off you.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, in other words, let's say you're a speaker or pastor, and you've got a book on, a teaching series that you do.
Yeah.
And so that book retails for $15, right? And so the publisher would sell you copies for, say, 55, maybe a 60% discount.
Right.
So let's just say they're selling it to you for $7, right?
Their cost is
about $2.
That's right. That's
and
right.
so they're making $5 a copy off you, and then you're supposed to. Well, now with self-publishing,
we just
you can
lost
get
him.
that cost.
Did we lose him? I can't. I'm sorry. Man, we were so close to actually doing this well. Is he completely gone? Did you happen to hit mute?
Really?
Oh, there you're back.
Okay.
Okay.
Am I here?
Yeah, we have no idea what happened.
Okay.
So the little secret to publishers
so
is
right. I mentioned that they sell you the book for $7, and they're making $5 on you per copy because they can do it for two. Well, you can do it for two yourself.
That's right.
And so if you're selling it for $15, the so-called back table sales, now you're making $13 a book instead of $6. And you can get your investment back much better. So I have done some of those books, and I like helping first-time authors. And I do that too. And so it's I've also had to be willing to push my chips into the table.
Yeah.
Kind of use a Las Vegas term for you.
Yeah.
And that's meaning that I write the book for free on speculation.
And then take part of the revenue stream.
Yeah, obviously I ask for a higher percentage.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And the book that I did that for comes out April 2nd that I'm really excited about is The Shot Caller.
Oh, man. That's exciting. That's
exciting. Yeah, with Casey Diaz. And he is just a wonderful man. This is a credible story that, the other thing that appealed to me is that the Latino community needs heroes.
Yes, they do. And
here's a hero. And we all have heard of Nicky Cruz. Nicky, God love him, is 78. And it's great that he did the forward. It's kind of like passing the torch.
Yes, it is.
And I think Casey is going to reach, I pray that he will reach a new generation. And he's such a humble, interesting guy. There is not one braggadocio bone in his body. He's just very matter of fact. This is who I was. And he has a special relationship with the Lord. Because in prison, when he became a Christian, the word got out. You just don't walk away from being a gang. You just, we tell the story. If he went out into the prison yard and told all the big gang guys, I can't do this anymore. And they turned his back on him and walked away. And
he still had to live through prison.
Well, yeah. An hour later, a guy ran up and said, man, you got to change your story. There's a green light on you. Well, you don't want to have a green light on you in prison. That means you're supposed to get stabbed with a shank. And he knew the stand he was taking. He was prepared. He said, if it's you, do what you have to do, brother. And that guy was so moved that prisoner accepted Christ and with Casey. So now they had two guys who were Christians. And so the gang members decided that they weren't going to kill them. Instead, they were going to give them hard candy. And hard candy means a beating within an inch of their life. And so for about a year, they never know when 7 guys would stomp on them and punch them and kick them and, send them to the infirmary. But they stood up for their faith. So,
Wow. Well, you know what? We cannot wait to have them. And I promise you this, we will do just that, sir. We will do just that. Well, Mike Yorkey, it is a privilege to spend this kind of time with you. You are just an extraordinary gentleman that has been used mightily by God. You've lived an extraordinary life. I use that word a lot because I just think it's an ordinary person being used extra special by God. That's what extraordinary means to me anyway. And we are just so grateful that you spent this time with the Christian.com community. And I really mean that.
No, thank you, Michael. And thank you for remembering how God used a meal in Costa Mesa at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse.
Yep.
And God used that 20 years ago to bring us together today. So thank you.
Yes, he did, sir. Yes, he did. So, hey, until the next time at Christian.com and our amazing LifeCast sessions, remember, your best life starts here.